The West Indies, 1717. It is the height of the Golden Age of Piracy, and we see pirates, swashbucklers, and sea rovers terrorising merchant ships throughout the Caribbean. Pirates such as Blackbeard, Charles Vane, and Benjamin Hornigold are at large, but there is another figure from this time period who made a name for themselves, not only as a result of the company they kept, but because of their reputation as a ruthless and battle-hardened pirate. Mary Read was a pirate active in the Caribbean during the Golden Age of Piracy, and is famous for being one of the few females to ever be formally convicted of piracy, as well as for her association with Anne Bonny and John Calico Jack Rackham. In her early life, she posed as a male and served the British Army, both in a regiment of foot and in the cavalry, before taking to a life at sea, first as a privateer and then as a pirate. This is the story of Mary Read, and the life and death of one of history's fiercest female pirates. Born in 1685, Mary Read was an illegitimate child. Her mother had married a sailor, whom took to sea before the birth of Mary's mother's first child, a boy. It is unknown if the father of this boy was killed or lost at sea, or if he simply abandoned his young wife and unborn son. Either way, he never returned. After the birth of her son, Mary's mother soon took up an affair with another man. It is unclear if she did this before or after knowing her husband would not be returning, although it is presumed to be after. Around the time that her son turned 1, Mary's mother again fell pregnant. To avoid the social judgment that she would inevitably face within English society at the time, a child born out of wedlock being considered as scandalous, Mary's mother moved to the countryside to live with friends. It was at this point that Mary Read was born. Coincidentally, this was around the same time that the infant son, Mary Read's older stepbrother and son of the now absent father, died. This presented Read's mother, who had been gradually slipping into poverty, with an opportunity. Read's mother-in-law, that is to say, Mary Read's step-grandmother, was a wealthy individual living in London. With her grandson now dead and her son lost at sea or estranged from Read and her mother, it is unlikely that she would be inclined to provide any financial aid to Mary Read and her impoverished mother. Read's mother decided at this point to disguise Mary as her dead son, to make it seem that Mary had in fact been born through a legitimate marriage. Dressing Mary in boy's clothes was enough to convince the grandmother that Mary was instead the lady's grandson, and the pair lived from the inheritance that she provided into Mary's early teen years. The grandmother provided £1 a week for the boy's maintenance until Mary was 12, when the grandmother died and the inheritance ceased. As Mary was old enough to work, by the standards of the day, her mother sent her to work as a page for a French woman who was a neighbour. However, Read did not stay in the position long, likely being unsuitable or unwilling to pursue a life of servitude. She instead left the position, joined the British Navy and signed aboard a man-of-war. Here Read served before the mast, a term referring to the location where common sailors' quarters were located aboard ship, in the forecastle at the ship's front, or fore. Serving as a powder monkey, her role here was to carry gunpowder from the powder magazine below decks to the naval cannons during engagements at sea. She was likely no older than 14 at the time, although powder monkeys could be as young as 12. At some point, Read transitioned from the Navy to the British Army, where she fought in Flanders against the French during either the War of Spanish Succession or during the 9 Years' War, known also as the War of Grand Alliance. It is disputed as to which engagement Read served in, due to both poorly kept military records detailing her time in the army and due to dispute over Read's date of birth. While the going theory is that Read was born 1685, as documented in Captain Charles Johnson's A General History of Pirates, Read could have been born any time between 1680 and 1690. Assuming Read was born in 1685, she would have been 16, were she fighting at the start of the War for Spanish Succession. Posing as a male once more, Read fought first in a regiment of foot and then in the cavalry. Read was accounted as having a better groomed horse and better kept accoutrements, clothing and equipment than many of his fellow soldiers. Read also won the admiration and respect of both soldiers and officers for displays of great gallantry during battle. While serving in the military, Read took a fancy to a Flemish soldier whom she shared a tent with, the British Army having formed a coalition with Dutch forces. However, as she was posing as a man, she could not express her feelings towards him for fear of being discharged from the army. She instead decided to keep the secret from him, and despite sharing a tent together, Read's true gender escaped the Flemish soldier's notice. Read decided that if she could not admit to the Flemish soldier that she was in fact a woman, she would instead stay by his side in battle. This led to Read rushing to join attacking parties if the Flemish soldier was involved, even if she was not commanded to do so, again bolstering her reputation for gallantry, although also garnering Read a reputation for being just a little bit mad. Eventually, Read did express her true feelings and identity to the Flemish soldier, whom initially tried to proposition Read into becoming his mistress. However, Read insisted that the soldier proposition her formally, and the two exchanged vows, albeit not openly. The pair continued to fight alongside each other until the end of the campaign. When the army was housed in winter barracks at the town of Breda in the Netherlands, Read publicly declared her true identity to her superiors and returned to life as a female. Soon after, the pair were married, with many of the officers they had fought alongside with in attendance at the wedding. The story also drew a good deal of local attention, and a large crowd turned out to witness the wedding. With the gifts that were received, and having been discharged from the army, although there are accounts that the pair purchased their discharge, Read and her husband opened up an ordinary in town called the Three Horseshoes. An ordinary was an eating house or tavern, serving simple meals. Unfortunately, this arrangement did not last long. A few years into their marriage, Read's husband had died unexpectedly, leaving her widowed, and her source of income from the tavern all but vanished. A good portion of her trade at the ordinary was from officers housed in the barracks at Breda. When peace talks were finalised and the war was over, her patrons disappeared, and she fell into poverty, causing her to have to close the ordinary. Having had little other trade but soldiering, Mary Read once again donned male's clothing and decided to return to the army, joining a regiment in Holland. However, unsatisfied with the pay and the limited opportunity for advancement during peacetimes, she decided to once again take to the seas in order to seek greater fortune. Adopting the pseudonym Mark Read, possibly for the second time, she boarded a ship bound for the West Indies, thought to be around 1715. But on the voyage, the ship was beset by pirates. The English pirates captured and plundered the Dutch ship before setting it loose. It was not taken as a prize. Read was either taken as a prisoner or joined the ranks of the pirates willingly, as she was thought to be an Englishman aboard a Dutch ship. It is possible the pirates considered Read to be a fellow countryman and so should join them instead. Given her desire for both adventure and wealth, it is possible that Read required little coercion into a life of piracy. However, there are accounts that Read was never reconciled to the idea of a lawless life. This attitude is similar to the defence she used for acts of piracy later in life. In any case, Read did not divulge her gender to her new shipmates and continued to assume her male disguise aboard the pirate ship. In December 1718, roughly the time that Mary Read was 33 years of age, the proclamation for suppressing of pirates, also known as the Act of Grace, was reissued by King George I. Widely known at the time as the King's Pardon, this offered all pirates a one-time opportunity to receive a royal pardon for all acts of piracy they had committed, as long as the pardon was accepted before July 1719. Read's crew accepted the pardon and set ashore to live as rich men and women for the money they had made through piracy. Soon afterwards, again finding herself without an income and having spent her earnings from her time at sea, Read decided to take up privateering, essentially becoming a state-sanctioned pirate. An interesting note about privateers is that while privateer captains were issued letters of marque, or mart, non-commissioned sailors, such as Read, would be subject to hanging for acts of piracy if they were captured by enemy states. Governor Woodes Rogers, who was later famous for ridding the Bahamas of pirates, and who was himself a famous sea captain and privateer, was outfitting privateering vessels to sail against the Spanish. Read and a number of other seafarers offered their services to Rogers, Read again disguised as a man. Read's privateering career would however prove to be short-lived, as not long into the voyage, the ship's crew mutinied against the captain. Read was once again a pirate. It is unknown if she willingly joined the mutiny, preferring the life of a pirate over that of a privateer, or if she was coerced into it, either through threat or circumstance. Remaining loyal to the captain in such instances would likely result in death or punishment by marooning. At some point shortly after 1920, Read joined the crew of Captain John Rackham, known to his crew as Calico Jack. Here she met another notorious female sailor posing as a male, Anne Bonny. Bonny had moved to Nassau with her husband, James Bonny. Nassau was the heart of the pirate republic and a safe haven for English pirates. James Bonny was himself a pirate, however had turned informant once Governor Woodes Rogers arrived on the island and worked with the authorities who were trying to rid the island of unwanted sea rovers. Finding her husband's line of work displeasing, Bonny eloped with Calico Jack and took to the seas as a pirate herself. It is disputed if Bonny's true gender was common knowledge amongst Rackham's crew. Many seafarers were opposed to having women on board, as they were considered bad luck. However, Rackham did not hide his relationship with Bonny from them. It is possible that Bonny, and eventually Read, revealed their true gender to their crewmates, but would pose as men during times of action, such as when boarding enemy ships and in battle. Prior to revealing herself to the crew, the closeness between Rackham and Bonny may not have been questioned, as it is possible the crew thought that Rackham had entered into marriage with Bonny. Marriage was a same-sex civil union where a pair would agree to share their income and belongings with one another, and was a common practice among sailors in the 17th and 18th century. It is also entirely possible that Rackham and Bonny's relationship went unquestioned, unnoticed, or was considered of little concern by his crew. At some point Bonny fell pregnant, and Rackham put her ashore to have their child, before she once more returned to the ship as a pirate. At this point, it is unlikely that Bonny's facade as a male could be maintained, if she did indeed maintain one to the crew in the first place. It should be noted that women were permitted to go to sea, typically fulfilling roles such as cooks and servants, but occasionally as seafarers and officers. However, it was uncommon. Many sailors did not trust women aboard ship. As an example, the notorious pirate Blackbeard banned women from his ship and had any that were captured from prize vessels strangled and pitched overboard. It is accounted that when Mary Read joined Rackham's crew in male disguise, Bonny took a fancy to her, thinking Read a man. Read and Bonny's relationship developed to a point where it is said that Rackham became furious with jealousy, and he proceeded to threaten, or attempted, to cut Read's throat. Upon being confronted, it is said Read pulled open her tunic to show Rackham that she was in fact a woman. It is difficult to determine if this story is accurate, however, as much of this information comes from Charles Johnson's work, A General History of the Pirates, written 1724. Whilst engaged in piracy around the Caribbean, a man joined Rackham's crew, either willingly or through force. Skilled seafarers and tradesmen often being made to join the ranks of the pirates if they wanted to or not, as their skills were invaluable at sea. Read became close friends with, and then romantically attracted to the seafarer, who at first did not suspect that his messmate was in fact a woman. Read gradually revealed her true identity, and the pair became romantically involved with one another. It is possible the seafarer had been forced into piracy, as it is said that he confided in Read that, frankly, he had a horror of piracy. In response, Read said that she too only desired a way out of piracy, as she found it to be a course of life which was utterly distasteful to her. Whether she truly felt this way or not could be disputed. During their time at sea, Read's new love interest entered into an argument with another seafarer, and the pair agreed to duel the following morning, the ship currently being at anchor. Read knew the pirate who her lover was going to fight was a far superior swordsman, but to refuse the duel would have him branded a coward, which in itself could be a dangerous reputation to hold within such a cutthroat world. Read decided to challenge the antagonistic pirate to a duel, scheduling it for 2 hours before the duel which would occur with her lover. It is said that Read fought the pirate with sword, killed him on the spot. Rackham and his crew continued to take prizes around the West Indies, capturing a number of fishing vessels and 2 sloops, single-mast sailing ships. Bonny and Read also managed to capture a schooner, reportedly boarding the vessel with much cursing whilst firing upon the crew on deck. They stole 50 rolls of tobacco and 9 sacks of allspice, known as Jamaican pepper or pimento. Rackham's activity within the Caribbean soon led to Governor Woodes Rogers dispatching the pirate hunter Jonathan Barnett to kill or capture the notorious rogue. Barnett found Rackham's ship at anchor at Bry Harbour Bay, Jamaica, and brought his sloop alongside. It is said that Bonny and Read were the only 2 on deck, and that, recognising the approaching ship as one of the governor's bounty hunters, called for the other pirates to join them in their defence of the ship. Rackham is said to have been hosting a rum party with another crew of English sailors, and so the majority of the crew was below decks drinking. Barnett quickly disabled Rackham's ship with a volley of cannon fire before attempting to board. It is accounted that defence of the ship fell to Bonny, Read, and another pirate who had joined them on deck, the rest of the crew either hiding below decks or being too drunk to offer much of a defence at all. It is rumoured that Read, angry at her cowering crewmates, shouted, "If there's a man among ye, you'll come up here and fight like the man ye are to be." After receiving no response, she allegedly fired her pistol into the ship's hold in order to persuade them further, killing 1 man and wounding others. However, this is possibly an elaboration of the story told by Johnson. Despite putting up a good fight against Barnett and his crew, Bonny and Read were soon overcome by the attackers, and Rackham and his whole gang of sea rovers were taken to Spanish Town, Jamaica, to stand trial. Rackham and the rest of his crew were sentenced to death, Rackham himself being hanged and gibbeted, 18th November 1720. Gibbeting was a process in which a criminal's body was bound in an iron cage and put on display to serve as a warning to others. Rackham's body was gibbeted near the entrance to Port Royal, in an area known today as Rackham's Cay. Read and Bonny stood trial pleading not guilty to acts of piracy, as they claimed to have been coerced into serving among Rackham's crew. This defence worked for Read's lover, who avoided prosecution altogether. However, evidence was brought against the pair, the most damning of which was testimony by Dorothy Thomas. Thomas claimed that her canoe had been robbed by the pair, and that she recognised the pirate duo for women due to the largeness of their breasts. Both Read and Bonny were convicted of piracy and sentenced to death. However, the pair pleaded the belly, claiming that they were pregnant. True or not, this permitted a stay of execution while the veracity of their claim was investigated, and both Read and Bonny were jailed. After this point, it is not known what became of Anne Bonny, although there are no records of her execution. It is thought that she escaped the noose and was set free, living out the rest of her days on land. Mary Read died of a violent fever whilst in prison, and is recorded as being buried on the 28th of April 1721 in St. Catherine's Church, Jamaica. There are no records of her baby being buried, indicating that she may have died whilst pregnant, or that she had lied in order to evade the noose. She was 36 years old at the time of her death. Mary Read's career as a pirate was short-lived. It is thought that she left for the West Indies around 1715, and despite joining a pirate crew, she accepted the king's pardon a few years later. She became a privateer around 1719, but joined a mutiny and returned to piracy. She joined Jack Rackham's crew in early 1720, however was captured in October 1720. Assuming Read did leave for the West Indies in 1715, although again this date is difficult to verify, she could have accepted the king's pardon as early as September 1717 when it was issued, although word of the declaration would take a few weeks to reach the West Indies from London. The deadline to accept the pardon was initially September 1718. Many pirates are known to have planned to accept the pardon, but continued committing acts of piracy for as long as possible before accepting it, allowing them to stockpile wealth before renouncing their piratical ways. The deadline was however extended to July 1719. Read's initial bout as a pirate could have been as short as 2 years if she accepted the pardon in 1717, or as long as 4 if she waited until 1719. When considering her whole career as a pirate, she may have been active for anywhere between 3 to 5 years. Mary Read is often depicted as having loose-fitting trousers and jackets. A number of depictions show her with exposed breasts. This is likely due to the stories that Read would, upon defeating an enemy, expose her breasts to show her foe that they had been bested by a woman. There are also accounts that during the duel where she defended her newfound lover, who had recently joined Rackham's crew, she exposed her breast to her combatant. This caused him to pause, giving Read an opportunity to drive her sword into the man's chest. It is possible, however, that this is another embellishment to her story that has, at this point, become almost legend. I've tried to make a full and accurate account of the life and death of Mary Read. However, as with all things pirate, it is difficult to truly distinguish between truth and myth. Now beat to quarters in the comments section. I'm Sealegs, we're done here.